never thought I'd be the kind of person who had a secret life. I used to think people with double identities were either criminals or thrill seekers. Turns out, sometimes you just get tired of being broke and invisible, and you find a version of yourself that pays the bills. NNFOR me. That version was Marina Muse. And it started small, late nights, dim lighting, an iPhone on a stack of books. It wasn't even supposed to be content, it was survival. My rent had gone up, my student loan payments restarted, and my assistant salary didn't stretch far in Miami. My boss liked to joke that exposure is the new bonus, and I laughed because everyone else did. But it stung. Every joke from him landed like a reminder that I was replaceable. NNTHE. Funny thing about Miami is how luxury and desperation blend into one texture. You're either the person on the yacht or the one bringing champagne to the person on the yacht. Most days, I was the second NNBUT online. As Marina Muse, I wasn't invisible. People noticed. They listened. They even paid. For the first time in years, I could breathe. I wasn't proud of it, but I wasn't ashamed either. I told myself I was reclaiming something. My image. My control. My bills got paid, my fridge wasn't empty, and no one in my office needed to know. At least, that's what I thought. NNTHE company I worked for, a venture fund, loved pretending we were a family. What that really meant was endless after hours, fake smiles, and the occasional yacht party to celebrate our culture. Those parties were where real deals happened. The unspoken rule was simple. Show up, look polished, laugh at the right people's jokes, and then THAT night. Everything smelled like salt and expensive perfume. The sea breeze carried the sound of champagne corks and some overplayed Drake remix. I remember thinking how surreal it felt. My life split in two. The assistant with a clipboard in one hand, and the girl with a secret following on her phone in the other. Then my boss found me by the railing. He looked relaxed. Too relaxed. The kind of calm that hides intention. He started small talk, pretending to care about my workload, my weekend plans. And then, just like that, he dropped it. NNHE said he'd stumbled across something interesting online. A profile, he said, that looked a lot like me in a wig. Then he laughed, like he was testing how far he could go before I'd flinch. My stomach turned cold. I laughed back, too loudly, pretending I didn't understand. NNHE leaned closer and said the name. Marina Muse, and I don't even remember what I said next. Probably nothing. My body froze, but my brain started sprinting. Every heartbeat sounded like a countdown. I tried to tell myself it was a joke, that maybe he saw something similar. But then he described one of my tattoos, the one on my shoulder blade, the one I'd never shown in the office. That's when I knew. I left the party early, pretending to feel seasick. My hands shook so hard I dropped my phone in the Uber. The driver asked if I was okay. I told him it was just motion sickness, but what I really felt was exposure. Like my skin had been peeled off. NNTHE next morning, I found a wire transfer in my account. $30,000. The memo line said, consulting retainer. Yeah, consulting an N. That's when I realized this wasn't about discovery. It was about ownership. He didn't want to ruin me. He wanted to buy my silence. And the worst part? For the first few days, I let him. I told myself it was just hush money for my peace. But the peace never came. I could feel him watching me, even when he wasn't in the room. Especially when he wasn't NNBUT, that wasn't even the worst part. Yin-en because a week later, I found out he hadn't just found my account. He'd been there all along. I think denial has a sound. For me, it was the quiet hum of my laptop fan at 2 a.m., the cursor blinking like it was waiting for me to admit something. And I stared at my OnlyFans analytics that night, scrolling through usernames and payments, trying to make sense of it. That's when I noticed one of the top subscribers, a name I'd seen for over a year, Seaview Investor. The handle felt random before. Now it didn't, and he'd joined 14 months ago, bought every single post, sent tips with messages like, "You deserve more." I used to think that was sweet. Now my stomach twisted. In 14 months. That was 3 months before I got hired. And an SO. He hadn't stumbled across my profile. He'd already been there. Watching. Paying. And then one day, he just decided to bring me into his real-world ecosystem. Like a collectible. A convenient assistant with a resume that looked good on paper, and a secret that kept her quiet. It felt like my entire reality split open. Every good job in the office, every compliment he ever gave me, now it all felt loaded. Like every conversation had been another move in a game I didn't know I was playing. NNTHE, next day at work, I could barely look at him. He acted normal, like we hadn't shared that moment on the yacht, like nothing had happened. I almost convinced myself to believe it, until during a team meeting he made some joke about people having hidden talents. Everyone laughed. He looked straight at me when he said it. NNMY jaw locked so tight I felt a crack in my ear. I smiled, but inside I wanted to scream. NNFOR weeks. I lived like that, pretending not to notice the new boundaries he drew around me. He started calling me into his office more often. Not for work. For check-ins. He'd talk about how loyalty mattered, how some people forget who gave them opportunities. I'd nod, keep my face blank, and count the seconds until I could leave. NNHE used the phrase, "I'm doing this for your own good," more times than I can remember. That one stung. What's worse, he didn't threaten me directly. He didn't need to. The implication hung in every silence. I'd seen him destroy people's careers over less. A rumor here, a misplaced file there, and someone was gone. NNSO. Yeah, I played along. I answered his emails fast, kept my tone polite. I kept working, smiling, doing everything right. But inside, something started shifting. Not anger. Not yet. Just this low, electric awareness that I wasn't powerless if I didn't stay afraid. One night, he sent another bonus. Another $30,000 transfer. No words. Just the money. I stared at the notification on my phone like it was blood pulsing under glass. That's when I realized it wasn't payment. It was proof. Every transaction tied him to me. Every digital footprint was a thread. And if I pulled hard enough, the whole web might collapse on him. It was the first time I felt a spark of control again. NNSO. I started documenting everything. I downloaded screenshots of every payment, every chat, every little trace of his presence online. I saved them to an encrypted drive. Labeled the folder in case of fire NNTHE next day, he asked me to book his flight to New York. His tone was normal, cheerful even. But when I handed him the itinerary, he gave me that smirk again, the one that used to make me blush. Now it made my stomach turn. NNHE said, "You're too sensitive. You should relax more." I wanted to tell him that people who say that are usually the ones who make you need therapy in the first place. But I didn't. Not yet. NNTHAT night, I went home, lit a candle, and backed up the folder twice. The glow from my screen flickered across the room like a heartbeat. For the first time in months, I slept without nightmares. Because now, I had something he didn't know about, and that meant the game had finally changed. Once I realized I had leverage, the fear didn't vanish. It just mutated. It stopped being panic and became strategy. Every interaction turned into a chess move I couldn't afford to lose. NNHE didn't know I knew, which gave me time. I started watching him the way he'd been watching me. His habits, his tone, his tells. He'd get sloppy sometimes, especially after long nights with investors. A little too familiar, a little too confident. That's when I noticed something. He needed me to stay complicit. He thrived on the idea that I'd stay quiet not because I was scared, but because I'd somehow accepted the role he'd written for me. The quiet assistant who owed him her success, her lifestyle, her protection. And honestly, part of me had. That was the hardest part to admit. Somewhere between the fear and the money, I'd started performing the version of myself he wanted. I told myself it was temporary, a survival tactic. But maybe that's how everyone starts losing themselves, one small justification at a time. Still, I had a plan now, a quiet one. I created backups, multiple. A hidden drive at home, one in cloud storage under a fake name, and a flash drive shaped like a seashell that I kept on my keychain. That little drive became my talisman. Every time I touched it, it reminded me I wasn't powerless. NNTHE office itself became unbearable. Every glance felt like surveillance. Every good morning carried subtext. HR was useless. They reported directly to him. I couldn't trust anyone. Even my closest coworker once said, "You're so lucky, he really likes you." I smiled and nodded. If only she knew. NNTHE breaking point came during another company retreat. Miami again, of course. A different yacht, same ocean. I guess money really does buy repetition. NNHE gave a speech about transparency and trust, while the waves rocked us gently like a lie being cradled. People clapped, drank, took selfies. I stood near the edge, gripping the railing. The smell of diesel and salt water made my head spin. Later, as the sun went down, he found me again. Same setup. Expensive cologne, fake charm, that smirk. He told me how grateful he was for my loyalty. Said not everyone understood what it means to keep things discreet. Then he mentioned a raise. I almost laughed. The word felt dirty. Didn't realize he was writing his own confession with every line. When I got home, I sat in the dark and listened to the sound of the fridge humming. It was the only noise in the apartment. My hands were steady for once. I opened my laptop, plugged in the seashell drive, and started organizing. Screenshots. Transfers. Messages. Metadata, ... Chen. All of it, wrote a note to myself. Just a plain text file called Read This If. In it, I explained everything. I set up an automated upload. If I didn't log in within 72 hours, the files would release themselves to a few choice destinations. Journalist, regulators, his wife's attorney paranoid? Maybe, but paranoia is just experience with better branding. And from that moment, everything shifted. The fear was still there, but it worked for me now. It made me sharper, quieter. He still thought he was in control, but really, he was sitting on a ticking clock he didn't know existed. And I started noticing the small cracks in him too. How he'd pause longer before meetings, double-check his phone, glance over at me when someone mentioned digital security. It was subtle, but it was there, like he could sense something was off, even if he couldn't name it. NNTHAT gave me the smallest bit of satisfaction, not revenge. Just balance, NNBUT. I also knew things like this don't stay balanced for long. Power doesn't share space. It consumes. And I could feel the moment coming when one of us would finally push too far. It happened faster than I expected. Power shifts rarely come with a warning label. One minute you think you've got time, and the next, everything starts unraveling. It was a Wednesday, late afternoon. The kind of Miami heat that makes the city buzz, like a fever. I was wrapping up expense reports when he called me into his office. His voice over the intercom was smooth, too smooth, like he'd rehearsed it. When I walked in, he was leaning back in his chair, scrolling on his phone. No smile this time. Just that flat look people get when they already know what they're about to do to you. NNHE said there were rumors floating around that someone might have been talking about certain private activities. His tone wasn't angry. It was condescending, like a teacher lecturing a student who disappointed him. He said he hoped I wasn't the kind of person who'd jeopardize everything we've built. Everything we've built. I almost laughed. What exactly had we built? A wall of silence? A transaction? A nightmare that just happened to pay well? NNHE leaned forward and said the line I still hear in my head sometimes. I did this for you. It hit me like a slap. The arrogance. The complete rewriting of reality. He really believed that. That paying me to stay quiet made him some kind of protector. I remember my hands resting on the edge of his desk, gripping so tight the wood bit into my palms. I didn't say much, I didn't need to, because while he talked about trust and loyalty, I was staring at the faint reflection of my own face in his monitor, and right there, in the top corner of the screen, was his open browser tab and OnlyFans. Logged in, NNMY stomach dropped, but then something inside me went quiet. Like the air before a storm, NNTHAT night, I made my move. Not the loud kind, just irreversible.nni uploaded one file, not the whole folder, just enough, payment logs, partial messages, cropped screenshots. An anonymous tip to a journalist known for digging into tech and finance scandals. No names, no company, just breadcrumbs. NNBY morning, there was a post trending on a finance gossip site. Anonymous CEO linked to questionable online transactions. No one knew who it was. But he knew, and that was enough. When I got to the office, the air felt different. Thicker. people whispered. He avoided eye contact for the first time since I'd met him. The silence between us was electric. Like the moment before a fuse blows, N at 3:07 p.m., he sent a Slack message, N, come to the conference room, now, and I went. The blinds were half closed, the projector still humming from a recent meeting. He stood by the window, jaw tight, voice low. He didn't accuse me outright. Of course he didn't. That would make it real. He just said, I hope you understand the kind of chaos one mistake can cause. And I met his eyes and said I did. I told him, softly, that sometimes chaos is the only thing that makes people pay attention. NNTHAT was the last real conversation we had. NNHE took medical leave a week later. The official story was stress. The unofficial one was that he was dealing with personal matters. I didn't correct anyone. I just kept my head down and kept working until my last paycheck cleared. Then I left. NNTHE. Day I cleaned out my desk, I pocketed the seashell flash drive. It felt lighter now, like it had served its purpose. The office smelled like lemon cleaner and anxiety. I didn't say goodbye to anyone, and I walked out into the humid Miami air, the sun bouncing off the glass towers. For the first time in a year, I didn't feel like prey. NNBUT. There was still one more thing I had to do, a final message he'd understand without me saying a word. It was his birthday. And I only remembered because the company calendar still sent me a reminder I forgot to disable. Birthday cake. Celebrate our fearless leader today, it said, like the universe itself was mocking me. I sat in my new apartment, smaller, quieter, full of secondhand furniture that smelled faintly of someone else's life, and stared at that notification. The laptop screen glowed blue in the dim light. A half-empty glass of wine sweated beside me. And I still had the seashell drive. It sat next to the keyboard, reflecting little flickers of light like it was breathing. It had become this weird symbol, a piece of the version of me that refused to die quietly. N. I didn't plan revenge. I didn't need to. The story was already spreading. More blogs picked it up. Journalists started digging. The board launched an internal ethics review. Classic damage control. But I stayed silent. He must have expected me to lash out, to destroy him publicly. Instead, I vanished. That's what scared him most. A few weeks later, I got an email from an unmarked address. Just one sentence. You win, please stop. I didn't reply. There was nothing to win. Just a void between two people who'd seen each other's worst selves. Some nights I'd walk along the water near the marina and think about that party. The smell of salt, the sound of laughter, his voice saying my alias like it was a secret password. It's strange how trauma and nostalgia can look identical in certain light. Anne and I started freelancing after that. Remote gigs, copywriting, marketing decks, boring but safe. The first time a new client called me by my real name, I almost cried. I hadn't realized how foreign it sounded in my own ears. NNBUT healing isn't linear. Some days I felt powerful, like I'd reclaimed something sacred. Other days I'd wake up sweating, convinced I'd see another wire transfer with his name attached. Every ping from my phone made my stomach clench. It's funny how even when you escape the cage, your body still flinches at the sound of the door. And I did one last thing before I let it go, and I mailed him the seashell drive. No note, no explanation, just the drive in a plain envelope. The return address was a random P.O. box. I imagined his face when he opened it, realizing it wasn't a threat, but a mirror. A quiet message. I'm done playing your game. Keep the pieces. It's been almost 6 months now. The fun quietly replaced him with someone new. A woman, ironically. The old LinkedIn posts calling him visionary and inspirational are gone. The whispers remain. Miami forgets fast, but never completely. Sometimes, when people ask why I left my last job, I just say, it wasn't a good fit. It's easier than explaining how power feels when it wraps around your throat with a smile. NNTHE thing is, I'm not proud of how I handled it. I stayed quiet too long. I accepted money I shouldn't have. I let fear dictate the shape of my days, but I also learned something. Silence can be both a prison and a weapon, depending on who's holding it. Now, when I open my laptop at night, there's no secret folder, No fake identity, no alternate life to manage. Just me, typing, breathing, existing without permission. NNTHE cursor blinks. The room hums. The sea outside my window is calm tonight. I can hear distant laughter from the boardwalk. Someone else's party, someone else's story starting. And sometimes I wonder if he ever scrolls through his phone late at night, half drunk, looking for the version of me that doesn't exist anymore. NN because I do the same. Not for him, but for the girl I used to be. The one who thought being seen was the same as being safe. And maybe that's the real ending. NNNOT, the silence. NNOT, the scandal. Just, finally being free to speak without whispering NNSO. Tell me, if you were me, would you have told the world, or just walked away with your peace?